Hello, everybody. Joe Bag of Donuts here. Welcome, one and all, new and returning viewers for a new series. That's right. Finally getting around to Mahoyo. I planned on starting this recording earlier today, but Amazon fucked me over by not sending me my capture device for my Switch because I'm a dummy and completely forgot about that this wasn't going to get a PC port because I have the physical version on order, also from Amazon. But I got the limited edition one, so that's not coming until like late January. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just download it on Steam. It's a visual novel. The fucking clueless PNG. But then, oops. Yep. For some reason, Japan hates PC ports for whatever reason, even though this was originally a PC launch. But hey, what can you do? Anyway, let's just jump right into this intro here. It was a winter day, 8 years prior, when it happened. That solemn morning when she understood that the value of life for the first time. Oh, look at me. Second line in, I'm already bungling it. Excellent. She understood the value of life for the very first time. Get used to that one, folks. Me fucking flubbing lines. Her home was nestled on the side of a mountain. Around it was nothing but inhospitable wilderness. She had no neighbors or childhood friends to speak of. Things like traveling to school or playing outside were more trouble than they ought to be. Indeed, with its pure water and bright stars, it was a place rich with memories both frustrating and halcyon. That was only during summer, though. Winters in those mountains were extremely frigid, each morning more severe than the last. Her father would drive her to the train station, after waiting 10 minutes for the engine to warm up and the iced-over windows to clear. Oh, come on, man. Just get out there with the fucking ice scraper and, elbow grease that shit. Her father would savor his morning coffee, leaving her to venture outside and rev the engine. Out the front door she would go, traversing the garden with icy breath until she reached the old sedan. As always, she inserted the key, then started the ignition. The engine rumbled to life. Just as she proudly finished that humble task that she'd done so many times before. A shrill scream pierced the air. She knew, even though it wasn't human, that the feeble sound was a cry of agony. A few moments passed. Her father came out and opened the hood of the car. Oh no! There was a fucking cat sitting on the engine block and he just fucking ripped it apart. Creaking fan belts, a monstrous-looking engine, and something that didn't belong. There was a cat, a mother by the looks of it, and her 2 kittens. The 3 cats had been huddled for warmth in the engine's compartment. The mother cat was missing its head. One of the kittens had been mangled beyond recognition by the engine belts and surely died instantly. The other kitten, its face half covered in blood, panted faintly. It desperately clung to its mother, or rather the chunk of meat that was its mother with the last bit of life it could muster. Her father lamented their plight. I put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. Also get used to that. The previous night had been especially cold. After he had returned home yesterday, the cats must have snuck under the hood, drawn by the warmth of the engine. He had slept next to the engine, and awoken to a storm of spinning belts. Cars in the 80s were not sealed particularly well, so this was not unheard of. Yep. Happened a few times over at my grandparents' house up in the countryside. You know, old fucking truck. You know, right, like you crawl underneath it, you can just fucking see right up into all the guts. Yeah, little squirrels and stuff get in there and fucking mincemeat.
いいんだ。が悪いんじゃないんだよ。
Her father's voice seemed distant. She could only make out a small tuft of the kitten's gray fur. The rest of it was caked in blood of its mother and brother. I can see its skull. The fragile life of a speckled kitten, trembling and possibly blind, continued to nuzzle against its dead mother's chest.
待ちなさい。
She took the kitten into her arms and ran deep into the mountains to her grandfather's house. Was it because she was overcome with regret? Or was it the shock of grief? Years later, She still wasn't sure. Fighting back the welling tears, she burst into her grandfather's workshop. Her grandfather was a magician who could do anything. She had never seen magic, so she knew that magic was a fantasy straight out of fairy tales, but so was her grandfather. She had to find him. He was the only one who could help.
その子猫の運命を変えろという。
The cave-dwelling magician said indifferently. Now, is he a magician? Because that word holds a lot of weight in the Nasuverse. And I guess if you're new here, hello, hi, welcome. I've read like all the visual novels. I've read fucking Tsukihime. I'll always call it Pork Slope Turkey Handle because I'm that old. Kigetsu Toya. I've read the plus discs. Fate's Day Night, Hollow Ataraxia. I've seen all the Kara no Kyokai movies. I haven't read the books, mainly because even by Nasu's own admission, some of the early ones are a bit rough to get through. It was his real first writing venture. And, speaking of first, from my understanding, mahoyo is in the timeline of, like, Nasuverse writings, even before, like, notes. Like, that's when it was penned up, like, the broad strokes of the story. So, yeah, it's gonna be interesting, This kitten needs our help, she pleaded. Whether it was a simple task, or Herculean labor, her grandfather would not say. He simply granted the girl's childish wish, like a machine. Ooh, my controller rumbled. Oh no, the girl said. Before she knew it, however, she was holding a tiny corpse in her hands. Its fur was cold. The warmth of life had left its body, and the tears she had fought so hard to hold back poured from her eyes. Regret spread through her chest like an endless gray sky.
トロだったな。結局元に戻すと。
Best to learn early, it is what it is. Her mind struggled to come to grips with what had just occurred. The last 10 minutes were a total blank. Who she met, what she had known, it was all as if it had never happened. The only thing she was sure of was that life, once extinguished, can never return.
そこに誰か
That day, it was her mistake that gave birth to me. Indeed, whatever occurred that day, it was a day of nostalgia and longing. This is the fairy tale of 8 years ago. The day they first met, that no magic can ever bring back. Give me some time to drink my coffee? Thanks. You can tell it's in the past because it's in sepia tone and it's on like a film reel. Arrogant, greedy, and able only to destroy. That must be a wolf. Oh no, Aoko has a fucking fursona. That's cringe. I don't have regrets. There's no looking back. If my pride has left you behind, my sincere condolences. But at any rate, I suppose it's my fate to die at the hands of Little Red Riding Hood. Gotta say, really digging these. Like, the last VN I played from Nasu was Kagetsu Toya, so quite a large jump in production values. Let's just say that's a nice way of putting it, very diplomatically. It was a quiet morning. From her bed, she could see the sky was the sky was an ashen watercolor gray. The comma there threw me off. The thermometer displayed 43 degrees Fahrenheit, a rather unforgiving temperature for November. Really? I mean, it's December right now as I'm recording this. Hello, you can check the date. And it was like 60 today, which is obscenely warm. 60 Fahrenheit, of course. I will not convert to Celsius for all you communists out there. But anyway, I'm from further up north, so I'm used to it being single digits this time of year. So this 60-degree, like, a bump from what I'm used to is pretty brutal, and I could not sleep at all today. Because I'm a vampire, and I sleep during the day. Her stomach woke her up with a growl, pathetically reminding her that she had completely missed breakfast. But lazy mornings like today were, for her, a blessing. It was already well past 8 in the morning. Any ordinary weekday tardiness would be unforgivable, but today, classes were cancelled in commemoration of the school's anniversary. Oh, good old Founders Day. Gratefully, she had every intention of taking it easy for the first time in ages. Outside the window was a gloomy gray, and it reminded her more of evening than morning. It wasn't a pleasant morning by any stretch of the imagination. But having been up all night until just 3 hours ago, she couldn't care less about the weather outside. Sorry, we can't get along. I'm one of those people who I need at least 9 hours of sleep in order to just function. But if I'm left alone on one of my days off, I will sleep easily 12 to 14 hours. All she cared about was more sleep. As long as she could spend her morning in bed, what was happening outside was of no concern to her. Though again, that's tricky being on graveyard shift, because I can't go outside and yell at my neighbors for using power tools at 3 in the afternoon, like normal human beings, and me being the weirdo. She shut the curtains. Then closed her eyes and tried to let sleep reclaim her.
せめてあと2時間ぐらいは凡庸な夢を見ていられますように。
Blissful slumber found her soon enough. Her consciousness faded. However, her simple request would be mercilessly refused. A faint but shrill sound lingered in her ears. It was the unmistakable ring of a telephone. Much to her chagrin, out of habit, her eyes popped open.
こんな日に限って。
Also, my phone's been ringing off the hook all day because there's an exercise on base and the fucking automated alert system keeps waking me up every half an hour to tell me about the FBCon changes. The telephone was situated in the foyer on the first floor. Answering it meant walking down a 30-floor corridor and going down a flight of stairs. In her sleep-deprived state, that distance seemed somewhere between incredibly far and astronomically far. And you gotta do it with only one eye open so that way you, keep half the sleepiness in so it's easier to go to bed after. The phone's incessant ringing continued. She knew the caller would eventually give up if she ignored it, but she chose to fight the urge. God damn, big fucking
アリス
house.
出ないの？
She thought her housemate would get it, but she soon had to abandon all hope. That realization struck that her housemate did not have the day off from school and was likely in class at her prestigious little hilltop academy. They were roommates! The caller proved incredibly persistent. That persistence made the volume of the ringing seem even louder.
もうせっかくの安眠を。
Just unplug it. She was left with no choice but to get up, throw a top on, and leave the room.
寒。
She rubbed her hands together to warm her numb fingers. The mansion's heating system was inadequate, to say the least, which meant that winter was the very most of uninvited guests. Hey, that's just like my place. It was built in the 40s, and I'm pretty sure there's no insulation in, half the walls. Never more so than on a dreary morning like this, when one didn't need to use a thermometer to know how cold it was. The mansion sat in the mountains and was surrounded by dense forests. Winter always arrived here first, before moving on to nearby towns. Also, I record in a little sunroom that was built as an addition to this place. And there's no, foundation underneath it. It's just built on stilts, so all the cold air from the ground just rises up into the floor and turns this little room into a fucking icebox. The robotic ring of the telephone reverberated throughout the long hallway. The mansion's furnishings had been so perfectly maintained that it made the place feel unlived. It seemed lonelier than it did splendid. Coupled with the dreary morning, it could have passed for a haunted house. It's like hotels.
ま、
You know,
幽霊屋敷そのものだけ
they're
ど
designed to be like spaces that people like sleep in, but you know, they're not like they're lived in spaces, but they're not like a space someone lives. If like that difference means anything to you.
だいたい二人で住むには広すぎるのよこの家。
She counted more than 30 rings since the first began. The caller either had a lot of free time on their hands or had a good understanding of the house's circumstances. She had a strong hunch that it was the latter. The window above looked out onto a gloomy sky. The moving backgrounds is making my brain melt. She hastened to catch the unrelenting ring in the act as soon as possible, though she had a feeling that her happy morning might come to a close the moment she caught it. It was here that a series of incidents began. Apologies for the lack of romance to this tale. For whether it be objectively true or merely supposition, it is always from gloomy and unassuming beginnings that extraordinary events are set into motion. We talking like lovey-dovey romance or like more like the fantastical, almost like literary romance feel, mood, vibe? Hey, I know those names. Whew, really moved up in the world, huh? When was mahoyo written? I want to say it was like 2011, 2012. It was well after Nasu was out of his little girl phase, but I think before he moved on to his giantess woman phase. Well, I guess it's redundant to say giantess woman because, you know, giantess is, you know, the feminine of giant, so. But anyway. Yeah, if I'm gonna be going pretty, I don't want to say in-depth into like Nasuverse bullshit when it comes up. But, you know, I've read all the stuff, so I'm going to make references to it if it comes up. I'm not, like, super deep into the lore, so I won't be like, oh, I can see how this fucking ties into fucking Primate's murder relationship with Ultra Rouge and how that, slash Emperor! Like, I'm not going to go that hard in the paint. General knowledge. Like I said, I've read most of like the primary games. I played. Oh god, what didn't I mention? I played Extra. I haven't played CCC, of course, because it hasn't been translated yet. Well, the majority of it. I played a little bit of Extella, but I hadn't played Extra by the time I played Estella, so I'm like, I don't really get this. Like I know the broad strokes, but it just wasn't vibing. And I know that has to do with stuff. I used to play Grand Order. I played all the way up from Japanese launch back when 10 rolls were 40 quartz. The AP regenerated slower. There was no guaranteed 4-star CE, so I fucking got tons of Mapo Tofu and Black Keys and Shinjis. What else sucked about it? It felt like my phone was gonna catch on fire. And MASH had a different voice actress. The dark days. But I stopped around, like, Lost Belt 3. Not because I didn't enjoy it, it's because I liked it too much, and I was spending a little too much money on it. Fortunately, I work full-time, so it's not that big of an issue, but I could tell that I was, like, emotionally compromised with my attachment to the characters. And that emotional manipulation of fucking squeezing money out of me, I didn't like. So now I just watch like other people's playthroughs on YouTube. The rain has subsided somewhat by the time she reached the school gate. Sunlight seemed to be playing peekaboo behind the clouds in the distance. Looked like it might be cleared up by early afternoon.
と言っても
That's
私に
usually
は
how it
関
is. It
係
gets
の
warm
ない
enough
話
and
だ
then
け
the
ど
fucking fog all dissipates. Like, just pouring some more coffee. The weather reflected her luck. On top of being forced out of the house at such an early hour, she had to suffer through the winter rain. Getting a bad feeling about this. The sinking feeling she had only grew as she passed through the entrance and headed inside. It was certainly a Japanese classroom. She didn't encounter any other students along the way, nor did she see anyone taking part in club activities either. The reception desk to the faculty office simply read, "Faculty closed." The school had given all its students the day off, except those explicitly summoned, like her. A fact that irked her more and more as the minutes passed. I understand that feeling. I work weekend shift, so I have to work on all the holidays that everyone has off. I mean, they give me the extra days off on, like, the back end, but, you know, it doesn't change the fact that, you know, everyone else is off having a good time and I'm fucking sitting around at work doing nothing. She opened the door to the faculty room and headed towards the desk she had visited a number of times before. The man at the desk wore a plain shirt and suit that were nonetheless neatly pressed. Slim-framed glasses adorned his face, giving off an amicable yet cunning air. The mild-mannered image this mid-20s man presented clashed with a cigarette he smoked. No. Why, you're smoking inside at a school? Well, I guess this is probably taking place early 90s, late 80s? Early 90s, probably. Yeah, that tracks. Especially in Japan. Didn't appear to have noticed her yet.
Yamashiro-sensei.
She closed the door with a bang. Showing no response to the sudden sound, Mr. Yamashiro lifted his head.
Yeah. Ohayo.
Shiro or
Aozaki-kun.
Shiro?
要件は聞
Then
いてい
you
る
see
か
it
な
again. I don't want to fuck with the controls to find out which one the backlog is and accidentally skip through like a ton of text.
はい。1時間前に自宅で事前に何の相談もなく
Blue? Blue? Is that a reference? Blue? Having graduated from this high school himself, Mr. Yamashiro, okay, there's no H in there, was not much older than the rest of the students. For that reason, students preferred him over the other teachers. He always had something interesting to talk about and kept conversations casual. In fact, seemed more like an older student than a teacher, but she unfortunately didn't share her fellow students' fondness for him. Yeah, teachers should, like, draw a firm line in the sand. Not get too buddy-buddy with the students. She was of the opinion that teachers should come across as more austere. Like an iron fist that could inspire both love and hate in equal measures. Not a buddy to joke and pal around with. Yeah, you can be on good terms, but, like, student-teacher relationship is important. I'm not your friend. It was the exact opposite of how she felt a teacher should be. It was only natural that her manner towards him would be forced and unfriendly. Not that she had ever been wired to make friendly small talk.
はあ、今日もご機嫌斜めみたいだね、君は。
All these background transitions.
それは先生の気のせいです
The matter-of-fact answer perfectly matched the displeasure displayed on her face. The bad mood from having to get up early and the tiredness from staying up late must have collectively made her look positively adversarial.
そうならいいんだけどね。彼にはそう辛く当たらないでくれよ。僕ら。
先生
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut
そ
you
の
off.
件ですけど私まだ詳しい話を聞かされていないのですが
Yeah, give us the plot. Exposit us. As Mr. Yamashiro met her piercing eyes, he finally understood the reason behind her tone and slowly put out his cigarette.
電話じゃあなんて聞いたの？
That's a nice looking school.
転入生の紹介をするとだけです理由も脈絡もない説明でした
One of Mr. Yamashiro's eyebrows stood up, impressed with the brevity of her answer. He could see that she was angry, not because she had been called in to school on her day off, but because she hadn't been told why she was here. Mr. Yamashiro chuckled sympathetically.
先生、これが笑い話ならそろそろ帰っていいでしょうか。
いや、ごめん謝るよ。冗談じゃなくて真面目な話なんだ。
Why don't
ちょっと
you
君の手を
do
借
it
りたくてね。
as a teacher?
本当に転入生の問題で。
You know, like
訳ありというか難しいというか。彼、宗十郎くんと言うんだけど、ちょっといろいろとずれていてね。僕らが案内してあげるより同世代の君の方が適任だと思ったんだ。
cool, so you're just uncomfortable and fucking shirking your responsibilities. Got it. She threw him an unamused look. It was negligent of them to be pushing teaching duties on her, but she did wonder how exactly this transfer student was peculiar. Maybe he meant the student had behavioral problems or was difficult somehow. But peculiar? She didn't have the slightest idea what that meant.
ずれてるなんてそう使わない表現だけど。
It's okay, Aoko. I'm fucking stupid too. She had her doubts, but swept them aside for now. This wasn't the time to get distracted by more concerns. The fact remains that this conversation was all peculiar. So, whoa. This conversation was all the peculiar she could handle, and she needed more information. She was already beginning to fantasize about saying no and curling up in her warm bed at home.
一つ質問があります。
何？あ、学年は君と同じ2年生だよ。性格は落ち着きがあって人の話をよく聞くタイプ。裏を返せば覇気がないとも取れるけど、それならそれで付き合いやすいだろ。
As long as he doesn't have the personality of a fucking wet sponge.
青崎くんとはクラスは違うけど、きっと仲良くな。
そういったことは本人から直接聞きますし、測ります。そうではなく、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
Though her tone was still stern, it was clear that she was willing to cooperate. Yeah, meet us halfway, bud. She had decided to put her feelings of dissatisfaction aside and focus on the task at hand. Forcing herself to act empathetic in spite of her self-absorbed nature was something she was used to. Paradoxically, this force of will was also the reason teachers put so much faith in her. To a point. At times, that strength shattered expectation, and on those occasions, they were left with no choice but to treat it like a natural disaster and weather it until it passed. That was how Mr. Yamashiro had come to deal with her over the past year.
もう一度だけ聞きます、山城先生。
Yeah, it really helps to, fucking grow a backbone. Like, in my, fucking late teens, early 20s, I was real fucking wishy-washy. But once you learn to tell people, no, fuck off, and learn to dig your heels in, life gets a whole lot easier. And also learn to just say, I don't care, it's not my problem, figure it out yourself. Fuck off, leave me alone.
それで、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
Pressured by a question without a clear yes or no answer, he answered.
それはね。別に青崎くんが先生方に敬遠されているのと同じぐらい信頼されていて、学校のためなら教師も生徒も一緒くたに切って捨てる鉄の生徒会長だからじゃないよ。
それ以外にこんな呼びつけを受ける理由はないと思いますけど。
Her eyes did nothing to hide her disbelief as she glared at him. Strength far beyond that of an ordinary 17-year-old girl, coupled with the youthful beauty of one. Mr. Yamashiro let slip a genuine smile, admiring the miraculous balance of qualities.
いや、責務だけでいいなら僕がやってるさ。この人選に関しちゃ教師や生徒会長といった役職も関係ないよ。なんていうか、こんな頼みを損得抜きで聞いてくれるのは君だけだと思ってね。適任ですからと強く推薦したわけ。
In other words, he knew she wouldn't say no.
山城先生。
うわ、怖っ。もう睨まない睨まない。言ったろ、僕にはともかく彼には笑顔でって。
Smoking and fucking off doing nothing.
とまあ、納得してくれたならすぐに移動しよう。もう随分待たせてしまっているからね。
No, to be fair, that's also what I try to do at work.
それと 雨の中ご苦労様。帰りはもちろん車で送るよ。
No. No, thank you. Mr. Yamashiro stood up gracefully. I'm good, thanks, she replied, before turning and walking out of the faculty room. Also, don't expect me to do voices. I can't do voices. I only have one voice, and it's what you're hearing right now. I've tried to do voices in the past. It just doesn't work. He had been waiting for about an hour. Well, he did. The rain showered lightly into a drizzle. The rain shower lightened into a drizzle. I was wondering why that didn't make sense. It's because I read it wrong. His mind wandered as he listened to the sound of the raindrops. The room was filled with neatly arranged rectangular tables. He was the only one there. Quite some time had passed since he had been brought to this room and asked to wait. Even the best-behaved students might have grown dissatisfied or anxious with the situation by now, but the boy stuck to his spot like a scarecrow. Did you at least get him some tea or coffee or a magazine? I mean, they didn't have cell phones back then. He was chilled to the bone. It was the end of November, and the low temperature in the morning had marked the start of winter. The room was not much warmer. The heater hadn't been turned on. Either he'd missed the teacher telling him to turn it on, or he'd never seen one in his life. He breathed lightly on his freezing fingers as he aimlessly surveyed his surroundings. Again, it's well, it might be 40 outside, but the temperature would have been colder during the night, and the room would have trapped the cold air, so let's just be generous and say it's the mid-30s in that room. The dreary place was a meeting room. The other students might have considered it a wonderful place to meet. To him, it was drab and overly spacious. It was a lifeless place that reminded him of an arid cave. Stuck in this cold room with absolutely nothing to do, his mind turned to what they wanted to discuss. Yep, gotta fucking pregame those discussions. Unable to talk because my coffee's fighting back. Unable to come up with a solid answer, he returned his attention to the sound of the rain. The rain hardly resembled the rain in the mountains. What do you mean? Though, he could still recognize it, barely. Its smell and sound were harsher, but at the end of the day, rain was still rain. So even this world, alien as it was, could have something in common with the mountains. That trivial detail perked him up a little. You're from the boonies? He liked how the town looked soaked in rain. I don't. I have an astigmatism, so it makes the lights unbearable when I'm driving. Especially when I'm driving at night. Naturally, he preferred sunny weather, but he liked rain in its own way. The fog from the rain had soaked up the scent of the soil, and it reminded him of home. It was at times like these that he was able to numb the anxiety the city gave him. I guess I'm the same way. I prefer the more rural areas over dense urban cities. I'm from how would I describe where I'm from? The edge of the suburb where it turns into nothing but farm fields and forests. I lived right between those lines. When I was growing up, I lived more on the suburb side, but then in my teenage years, we moved out into the woods. So, and, I've fucking bounced around all over the country, so, since then, so, I've experienced the whole gambit, and, nothing like home. I prefer it when it's quieter, and I don't have to listen to fucking cars on the highway. But then he let out a discouraged sigh. How pathetic. He'd already been here 2 weeks, and thoughts of his hometown still made him sad. Perhaps feeling that he was being unfair to his new life, he composed himself and continued to wait patiently. As if having a passion for distractions, his attention returned to the sound of the rain once more. Waiting like this didn't seem to be particularly hard for him. Quietly endured the numbing cold and the hour alone with calm, deep breaths. As the saying goes, good things come to those who wait. Strong point of his or not, he was astonishingly patient. I'm pretty good at that too. I have the ability to just like turn off my brain and just let my eyes drift apart and just like listen to the fucking background radiation static of the universe and just like completely disconnect from reality for like hours at a time if I need to. It was certainly helping him out in this moment. Good old garbage incinerator over there. Sure, that's great for the environment. She, on the other hand, was livid. The profile of the transfer student had been explained to her on the way to the meeting room. She was told that he lived his whole life up in the mountains without any electricity. Okay, a little more rural than me. That meant more than half a civilized society would have been an utter mystery to him.
なんて絶望的な断絶。戦後どころか戦前の話じゃない。ロビンソンにも程がある。
She had every right to be angry. Yeah, but what the fuck's she supposed to do? His village had apparently remained isolated in the mountains for many years. Contact with the villages in the foothills of the mountains only occurred once a month or so, which was unfathomable in modern Japan. Although expressways and Japan Rail, the old national railways, now span the country like arteries, it wasn't entirely impossible for mountain villages like his to exist. Well, yeah, Japan's like has mountains running down the entire center of it. You know, you just fucking plop down in there. It's like, well, fucking have fun running a rail network there. But she couldn't imagine how someone born to such circumstances would think or live.
電気がないって、村に行き渡っていないだけで公衆電話ぐらいはあったんですよね。
なかったそうだよ。こっちに暮らすようになってまず驚いたのが電話だそうだし。電話って便利ですねなんて真顔で言われてね。そういえばそうだなぁと再確認させられたぐらいだよ。
She shot a sidelong glance his way as he laughed. It seemed that the naivete of the country boy had cheered up Mr. Yamashiro a bit.
駐在もい
I'm
ない
gonna
って
keep
こ
calling
と
him
か。
Yamashiro. It just rolls off the tongue better
う
than
ちも実家は
Shiro.
山奥ですから電気が通っていないのはありえないとは言いませんけど、そいつ学校も知らないんですか？
うん。どんなものかは知っていたそうだけど、実際来るのは
No
今日が初めてらし
one-room
い。
schoolhouses in a
そ
barn.
れで緊張していたのかな。あまり会話も弾まなかった。ああいうのも野生児っていうのかな。狼に育てられた狼少年みたいな。あ、いや、探検隊の話だね。
No, it's the 21st century. We can't be talking about people like that.
怖いな、青崎くん。冗談だって。そう睨まないでくれ。大丈夫。話してみた感
Aoko,
じ。
First
おとな
Nations
しい子だったか
ally,
ら。
doesn't appreciate
なんて
this
いう
fucking
か、
disparaging
言葉の
talk.
通じない小動物みたいな感じ。
山城先生、その例え気休めになってませんから。
As she gave her blunt reply, she tried to simulate in her mind what life without electricity would be like, but the thought of it took her sour mood from bad to worse. After all, it was a world she had never known. She could understand why the teachers had given up. She, too, wanted to give up and return to her warm bed, but her good-for-nothing pride was holding her hostage. Not only did the teachers believe she was up to the task, but she also believed she could do it. It wasn't that easy to go back on her word, no matter how bad things looked after the fact. She walked along the hallway, the rain pattering in the background. The meeting room was already in sight. With a furrowed brow, she fixed her long hair in anticipation of meeting the unknown stranger within. Her elegant strides were like those of a confident general going into battle.
いや、青崎くん。
Well, you know, the generals usually don't lead from the front because that's how you get fucking cannonball to the chest and all of a sudden, oh, there goes your formation.
君を信頼してる僕だけど、念のため確認しておくよ。なんていうか、優しくね。で、
作り笑いは苦手です。
Same. I
一応
can't
努
fucking
力している
smile
つもり
for
で
the
すが。
life of me. I look like a fucking convict in half my photos. A hard resting bitch face.
ああ、
Doesn't
そうなん
help
だ。
I have fairly sharp
それはよかっ
features.
た。いやー、ほんとよかった。 青
when
崎
new
くんに
people
も
show
苦手
up,
なものってあったんだね。
I look real fucking stern and mad when I'm just like sitting there thinking about like what I have in the fridge at home and what I'm gonna make for dinner when I get back. Or, like, I'll be reading a book just looking fucking pissed, I guess, from what other people say. And she's like, no, I'm just thinking. Mr. Yamasiro's shoulders slumped the second they reached the meeting room. As he put his hand on the door, his eyes seemed to say to her, be nice, please. This only made her more irritated.
分かってるわよ。愛想が悪いってのは。でも笑顔
Fortunately, I
は
think
意
I'm
識し
pretty
て作るも
personable,
のじゃ
so
ないんだし。
once people get past my mean glare or whatever it is I have, you know, I'm fairly nice and easy to talk to.
だいたいそういうインスタントな人付き合いなら飛び丸の方が向いてるって。
Yes, just name drop characters we haven't met yet. She sighed about her social shortcomings, but then it occurred to her that being called into school on a day off while sleep deprived wasn't anything to smile about anyway. She also thought the person responsible for this mess would be better off attending elementary school. Might not be his fault, but neither was it her duty or obligation to do the teacher's work for them. At the very least, they could have used their brains and organized all this on a normal school day. Another complaint she wanted to voice later.
いや、というか敵。なんであろうと敵。悪いけど、情状酌量以前に敵。間が悪いのはお互い様っていうか、ほんと、なんでよりにもよってこんな
Oh
忙
yeah,
しい
you were
時に。
so busy when they called you in, but... Her pounding headache from a lack of sleep had boosted her aggression by 10%. No matter how harmless the guy on the other side of the door may be, anyone who disturbed her sleep was the enemy. And just as she was reaching peak annoyance, Mr. Yamasiro opened the door to the meeting room. The room slowly slid into view. She didn't care for formalities. She looked straight ahead and stormed into the room, and found herself face to face with a most unusual opponent. You want to know a trick to get out of doing that? On your days off, just immediately crack open a beer and just have it with you on your desk. So that way, you know, get a call from work. Nope, can't come in, boss. I've been drinking. And they're like, fuck, shit. And I was like, yep, sorry, call someone else. Just fucking slam that thing real quick. And they're like, well, at least for my job, even if it's like, oh, we can come get someone to get you. No, you can't. Nope, not allowed to touch anything. I have booze in my system. Well, I'll go to jail. Before we go on, let's see from another perspective. Turning back the clock just a bit. You don't have to do anything. For some, these words are a priceless luxury. For others, they are unbearable torture. For the proactive girl, it was definitely the former, though she'd be too suspicious of the motives of anybody giving her such a gift to accept it. For the passive boy, it was definitely the latter, a bitter thorn that made him homesick, though at this very moment his mind was still distracted by the wait for his face to reveal any discontent. He maintained perfect posture as he stared at the gray sky. He'd already waited a whole hour, but figured they must have had their reasons for making him wait. And as long as he had the sound of the rain to soothe him, he could keep on waiting.
でもそろそろ9時を過ぎるのか。どうなんだろ
He had been vaguely keeping track of the time as he listened to the rain. Due to the holiday, the school building was completely silent, except for the patter of the rain on the window. The mood felt as damp as the air. It was then he heard the heavy clatter of footsteps approaching.
う。よかった。忘れられているかと思った。
I'm in a situation where they actually have forgotten about me. You could hear two sets of footsteps, one heavier, belonging to an adult. Sure, that's what it is, and it's not just Aoko fucking stomping her way through the hallway. He breathed a sigh of relief as the door slid open.
すまないね。随分とお待たせしちゃって。
First person he saw was a man wearing glasses and an awkward smile. That's Mr. Yamasiro, the one who brought me here.
って あれ里中先生いないんですか？ひどいな。話し相手になってあげてと言ったのに。
Man, the teachers in this school fucking suck. Mr. Yamashiro scratched his head, looking increasingly apologetic. And then, from behind him, with a tight-lipped expression that made it clear she didn't want to be there. She didn't want to be there. Oh man, I put a weird emphasis on that. A dark-haired girl with a determined look in her eyes appeared. I mean, her hair's not that dark. Oh god. Sojuro? Fuck. Yeah, Sojuro. Okay. Sojuro gulped. I'll need to hear it pronounced a couple more times in order to fucking lock it in. The sound of the rain on the window faded into nothingness. That's when he knew. This is how it felt when time stood still. Zawarodo? She blinked quickly a few times, as if taken aback. Why was anyone's guess? The boy was everything she expected a naive country boy to look like. However, she felt something she couldn't understand. I did it again. I said understand funny. I say understand as a joke like I do not understand, and sometimes it just slips out like that. His eyes widened slightly, as if taken aback. The reason was obvious. Putting his feelings into words was a different matter altogether, so we will never know exactly what he experienced in that moment. That's when it hit him. He sensed he'd been touched by the hands of destiny.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生の静木宗十郎くん。
Yeah, Sojuro. Okay.
で、こっちの彼女が静木くんの案内役。うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
His voice and the sound of the rain seemed distant. This is how they first met. Such was their start, for better or worse, like the ephemeral beauty of fireworks. It was commonly believed among the students that Aoko was always in a foul mood. But this gossip was 90% prejudice, as Aoko simply didn't have time to be irritated 24/7. The reality was that she simply didn't want to explain herself all the time, and therefore seemed angry about something, obvious or not. This idle gossip did, however, lead to her earning the title of one of the school's 7 deadly threats. The remaining 10% of the gossip was right on the mark. Aoko herself often had the feeling that her tendency to feel animosity towards harmless things was akin to what a chronic headache sufferer might experience. Today fell under that 10%. For today, her anger was pure, and her childish and selfish display was befitting of her actual age. The meeting room was dimly lit, awash in the colors of the rain. To reduce electricity costs, school regulations forbid the use of lights during the day. Really? Fucking the budget's that tight? This was the setting the three of them found themselves in. Her first impression was that his calm demeanor reminded her of a field of wild flowers. Alright, weird comparison to draw. In spite of his perfect posture, he seemed subdued and frail. Might have to do with all the bandages wrapped around his neck? Though describing him as meek would be going too far, at the very least, he was passive. Even though his uniform there's an R in there. Even through his uniform, she could see that he was thinner than average. His dark hair was unkempt, and he came across as a wholly unforgettable boy. A wholly forgettable boy. I should probably read the words that are actually on the screen instead of just making them up as I go along, huh? If she had to look at him in a more positive light, she would describe him as more of a young man than a boy. It was his calm demeanor that made him seem more mature. Was that the cause of Aoko is fucking Little Witch Academia. Aoko's reasonless reaction? I mean, they're both stupid, and they both do magic, so, tracks. Expect the wires to get crossed in my head a couple times. He seemed almost too at home in the meeting room, and she was left with the impression that it was her and the teacher, not this outsider, who were the guests here. She felt an unidentifiable aggravation building within her, almost as if her right to be here was in question. Aoko felt her raising her natural defenses.
信じられない。
Getting ready to square up?
私、今わけもなく怒ってない。
Yeah, that sounds like a woman. She hated not understanding things, her own emotions in particular. It pained her less than you would imagine for a perfectionist like her, but it still nagged her like a thorn in her side.
いやーほら青崎くん挨拶してあげなくちゃ。
Mr. Yamasiro's attempt to relieve the tension was equally irritating.
挨拶？
After casting a nasty glance in the teacher's direction, Aoko turned to face the boy. From an outsider's perspective, it might have looked like a stare down. And in that instant, the culmination of her emotional state hurtled towards the innocent boy and skewered him.
いや待たせたねしずきくん。
Hearing his name, Sojuro came to his senses. His stunned gaze shook loose. He took a deep breath to clear his head. Chalking it up to nerves, Mr. Yamasiro broke out a smile and turned to the girl standing beside him.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生のしずき宗十郎くん。で、こっちの彼女がしずきくんの案内役。うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
Very round sounding name. Lots of "ow" in it. Having been introduced by Mr. Yamashiro, the girl took a step forward. Her eyes were merciless. Her stare, an unspoken threat to violently trample her opponent. Sojuro, on the other hand, managed to keep his own composure despite the shock at how confrontational she appeared. He had never been greeted quite like this before, but supposed, mistakenly, that was how people treated each other in the city. The exchange must have looked quite dramatic to an onlooker. The girl ready to brawl. An earnest country boy desperate to understand. It was a murderous limbo, especially for anyone in the room with them. Yeah, might catch a fucking stray shoulder. I mean, shoulder? Elbow or fucking fist. It'd be hard to catch a stray shoulder. Someone fucking Tatsuzanko him into the wall, I guess. Like Mr. Yamasiro, for example. While he had thought he made the right decision in choosing the honor student to help him out, she was in an inexplicably bad mood, and the tension in the air was undeniable. I don't think it's a very inexplicable guy who called her in on her day off. It was this moment that he realized his failure. His realization had come far too late. One false move, and this girl, for whom no problem was too large, would become a storm that would rock the very foundations of the school. Just as the almighty Joker card could bring either fortune and disaster, the sole teacher who had been present at the time would come to bear the blame for the scandal that ensued.
イケてる。二人とも気は合うようだね。
Yeah,
それじゃあ僕はこの辺でいいかな。
Coward. Mr. Yamashiro laughed nervously as he crept towards the door.
僕は職員室にいるから終わったら来るように。 いいかい青崎くん。
Yeah, just
Kure
fucking
kure.
scram. You're not gonna need
Kure kure
help
mo
here
da ze.
anyway.
なんていうか生徒会長としての度量の広さをこの際僕に信じさせてほしいかな。
God, I fucking hate people like him. Mr. Yamashiro left, leaving the two in a locked-eyed state, one in which one set of eyes was doing all the glaring. All that remained in the room was a naive boy and a cross-armed guarded girl. The two lingered in silence. They resembled shogi players, agonizing over the first moves, though ultimately it was only Aoko that had considered the scene that carefully. She decided to put her irritation aside for the time being. With no reason to feel revulsion for him in the first place, she sighed deeply and faced Sojuro.
まあいいわ。山城先生がヒルアンドンなのは今に始まったことじゃないし。それで、あなた名前は？
Her tone was nothing if not reproachful, though he had done nothing to offend her. But the boy failed to pick up on it. Oh my god, it's like when you fucking have a homeschooled kid all of a sudden dropped into your class, and they just like... They're... What's a good way to describe it? Social intelligence is well below average, and just... Their ability to pick up on cues is just... zero. Incapable of such venom himself.
ああ、静木宗十郎かな。君は青崎さんだったね。
For whatever reason, came across as happy in his response.
さんはいいわ。柄じゃないから。
Also, quit being so nice. Can't you tell I'm trying to fight you?
こっちは静木くんでいい？
いいって何が？
だから呼び方。くんづけでいいかって聞いてるの。
うん。
何よ。
Like,
おかしなこと
we
言っ
good
た？
with
私。
no honorifics? Or like...
いや、すごく。
The boy replied immediately, as if it was a natural response, but quickly second-guessed himself.
いや、いいんだ。
Yeah, we're talking past each other here. Let's be more upfront and frank.
静木くんで頼む。君は青崎でいいんだよな。
よろしく。
She followed her blunt reply with a swift turn away from him. While she was hardly thrilled at the prospect of the task at hand, it had been entrusted to her, and it was her personal policy to see it through to the end.
悪いけど、優しくしてあげる気はないから。時間も惜しいし、手早く行くわよ。
それは助かる。やっぱり時間は大切だ。
Aoko's blunt rancor was lost on him once again. Humans tend to be overly conscious about being ignored, whatever form that takes. But despite being peeved at landing none of her attacks, Aoko did her best to act professional and directed her guest into the hallway. There's no sunlight in the hallway, nor any sign of life. It was more like a prison than a cave was... What? It was more like a prison than the cave that was the meeting room. As it dawned on Aoko that the hallway matched her mood, she sighed once again.
まず聞いておくけど、山城先生から聞いたことは理解し
Yeah,
てる。
very fucking brutalist looking school design here.
ああ、学校の仕組みについては分かった。この建物全部に同い年の人間がいるなんて、ちょっと
Yeah,
想像できないけど。
there's that many young people here? What?
そう、よかったわね。
Aoko rubbed her forehead. The Sojuro kid had no idea what he was in for. Apparently, all he'd heard about school was that it's a place where a lot of people met to study. High school teachers imparted to students their knowledge in various fields of study, while fostering discipline and creativity. But never did Aoko imagine that she would have to explain the concept of school itself to someone. Yes, fundamentals were important. This was absurd. She had serious doubts whether he could even handle classes, but Mr. Yamashiro insisted that things would work out somehow. Sojuro had managed to pass the transfer exam, after all. Barely.
ま、私には関係ないけど。
Aoko grumbled mentally as she walked down the hallway. She consoled herself with the fact that today would be the only day she'd spend with this boy out of time, or at least she'd try to keep that way.
青崎、
He asked, calmly trying to get her attention.
何？
こっちも一つ聞いていいかな。
だから何？
俺の気のせいだと思うんだが、君はまるで何かを睨んでいるように見える。
Yeah, have you tried calming down?
やはり今朝は悪いものでも。
His gaze revealed earnest concern, as if asking her if she remembered to eat breakfast. It was like another hammer to her head. Aoko makes such good faces. I've seen a lot of her sprites. It was true that Aoko had been glaring at Sojuro the entire time. Glaring red-hot daggers, in fact. Not just to him, but the universe. Even on her best days, her roommate used to remark,
青子の視線は普通の人には厳しいわ。もう少し多くのことに寛大になるべきね。
I just turned that frown upside down. She'd been warned that her emotions were so naked on her face that people treated her like a powder keg. How naive could that boy be to not pick up on this?
私をバカにしてるってわけじゃ
No,
なさそうよ。
he's just
こ
earnestly
の場合
asking. Just small talk. Even she found her own attempt to reassure herself unconvincing. It began to dawn on Aoko, far too late, that compared to her, this laid-back transfer student might as well have been from another planet.
いいわ。言葉にしないとわからないようだから言うけど、
Yes,
ま
let's
る
be
で
frank and
じゃなく
earnest.
て、ズバリそうなの。あなたの気のせいじゃなくて、私は視線で遠回しに感情を表現してたの。い
It
ちい
both
ち声に
is
出すのも、
and is
会話
not
に
your
するのも面倒だから。
In response to her words, the Martian clapped his hands together.
なるほど。どうしてそうしたいのかはわからないが、確かにそっちの方が手っ取り早い意思表現だ。
Yeah, who has time to waste on actually being angry? Sojuro accepted her reasoning without argument, though he still had no idea what kinds of emotions she was trying to express. It was as if he could hear the words but didn't grasp the meaning. Ideas that should have connected were instead separated into blocks.
確かにずれてるわ、こいつ。
Mr. Yamasiro's words made sense to her now. What was odd about this boy went way beyond naivety. A stranger in a strange land he may be, but it was only civilized to forgive him, To forgive him some jet lag-induced confusion.
じゃ、とりあえずあなたの教室に行くから。
She had regained her composure. Sojuro raised his hand and stopped in his tracks.
あと一つ。
Shoot. Damn, long fingers. What the fuck? Aoko waited for Sojuro to continue. The boy was patient to a fault. She rubbed her forehead with her hand again, nursing a vague feeling of uneasiness.
これもちょっとした疑問なんだが、なんで君は怒って
Maybe
る
his
んだ？
fingers are normal, and I just have very petite lady hands.
怒るのが商売とか、そういう家柄の人なのか？
Mind of business? What do you mean? A long silence. Though she knew it wouldn't change the situation, she remembered her regret at answering the phone that morning. He meant no harm. She repeated this thought like a mantra in an attempt to keep her impulses in check.
別にあなたのせいじゃないから気にする必要はないわ。ただ、この一瞬とお昼まで眠っていた場合を計りにかけたら、あまりに利益の違いがあって
Yeah,
頭
there
を
we go.
抱えた
Now
だ
I'll
けよ。
understand, I hope. With that vague answer, she started to walk again, and turned her gaze away from this rude stranger named Sojuro's... Oh god. Shizuki. Ugh. Ugh. Shizuki? Yeah, I guess it is. Just C. Okay. While what constitutes normal is certainly up for debate, most would undoubtedly refer to him as so. He was a simple and nice boy with nondescript features. If he were an ice cream flavor, he would be vanilla. I just like that people associate vanilla with, like, nothingness. Like, vanilla's just a good flavor. It's just, that's why it's, like, considered the bog standard. Because it's that good. And Sojuro found Aoko to be very businesslike and full of life. There was a certain purpose to her movements, as they began and ended in an orderly fashion. The way her finger raised when she pointed at things. The way she made her way across the hallways and classrooms. The way she would occasionally glance back at him to make sure he was keeping pace. Each and every movement was so impressive that he felt he couldn't take her eyes off her. Aoko showed him to his classroom, Class C of the 11th grade. The room certainly displayed more of a human touch than the previous meeting room, but Sojuro was none the wiser as to its function. Aoko gave a brief explanation before they visited individual subject classrooms, as well as the gym, cafeteria, locker room, and school infirmary. Sojuro asked so many questions that much time passed before they reached the AV room on the second floor. Oh god, you're gonna fucking show him a VHS player? It'll blow his mind. Sojuro stopped, looking genuinely concerned.
あと20分経つと1時だ。
You need lunch?
嘘でしょ？うちの校舎そんな広くないわよ。
The tour had begun around 10, which meant that 3 hours had passed. A tour of the school shouldn't take anywhere near this long.
そうだったわね。行く先々で根掘り葉掘り聞かれちゃ、そりゃ何時間でも経つわ。
You were still going, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Aoko glared at Sojuro. She was being sarcastic, of course, knowing full well that he would never pick up on it. To her surprise, he looked down apologetically, unable to hide his dejection.
なんだこいつ。ちゃんとしてるっちゃ。
Yeah, why are you being so mean? God. The guy before her now was nothing like earlier. In contrast to seeing his once impenetrable veneer when they first met, she found herself feeling sympathetic. Momentarily, at least, until her irritation returned in full force.
で、何がまずいの？覚えることが多すぎてパンクしたなんて言わないでね。
Rude.
いや、それもあるけど、学校のことは別にして1時になるとまずい
What
な。
happens at 1 o'clock? Sojuro's gaze wandered, as if worried about something. If he was worried about the weather, he should have had a hard time seeing it, as there were no windows in this hallway.
へえ、時間を気にするってことは用事があるのね。そう。人の予定を引っかき回しておいて、自分だけ好きなようにやろうって言うんだ。
Hey, the guy just moved here. Cut him some slack. He probably has a lot of, like, other appointments to go to.
なんだ、顔に似合わずいい人ね、君。
いや、褒めても何も出ないぞ。
誰も褒めちゃいないわよ。
You can't be sarcastic with this guy. She yelled at him, unable to hold back her fury.
で、それで、一体何の用なの？
Sojuro's face lit up as he finally understood what she was asking him.
そこは秘密にしておきたい。
Well, so we're not going to get anywhere like this. He said with a perfectly straight face.
慣れ始めたつもりだったけど、こいつのこういったテンポにも失神しそうになるわ。
Her frustration was natural. Still, she did everything she could to stifle her feelings and fake a smile.
しずきくん？
Didn't want to say anything else there. Just his name. Okay. She took a step forward.
秘密だってば。
Feeling the mood change drastically, Sojuro took a step back. And another. Are you gonna fucking comment on this guy? No matter how many steps he took back, she kept edging towards him. She was smiling, but he thought he could see the blood boiling beneath her skin.
これ最後の質問にしとくわね。あなた私をからかって楽しい？
He had no intention of mocking her, though at this point he doubted presenting any evidence to prove this would do much to ease that forced smile on
分か
her
った。
face.
説明する。
His arms raised in surrender. She halted her advance and freed her face from that unseemingly smile.
実は1時からアルバイトがあるんだ。
Oh,
でもここはそういうの禁止なんだろ？
that's dumb. I think that's dumb how Japanese schools have that rule. Like, I get it, it's like your job is to study, but, you know, people gotta have a life, and you need money to have a life.
そうだけど、あ、禁止されてるから秘密にしようと
Yeah,
思
I
っ
don't
た
think
の？
Aoko's gonna rat on
バ
you.
カね。それなら許可さえ下りていれば問題ないわよ。
知ってる。試験の時に許可をもらってる。
へえ。
Aoko's face lit up as she realized he might not be the piece of work she thought him to be. Yet,
しかし許可は一つしかもらえなかった。
working several. It's okay, I worked under the table in high school too.
あなた
I worked at
掛
a
け持ち
printing
でバイト
company
してるの？
that one of my mom's friends managed. Really, really good money. It was like, well, I say good money. It was like $11.50 an hour. But for, you know, for a broke-ass high schooler, that's good. You needed to be 18 to work on the floor. And I was only 17, but, you know, I looked like I was in my mid-20s when I was fucking 16, so no one asked any questions. No. Most of the time, all I would do was just sit in a back room and, like, box up, God. Okay, so, you know, like when you're at the grocery store and you're walking down the aisles, and you go to the aisle that has the wine, and there's, like, the tags on, like, the necks of the bottles that say, like, $2 off at register for whatever, like the coupons? I was the guy who, like, took those and punched the holes in them so that way they could hang on the necks of the bottles. And I would box those for, like, 6 hours after school in my senior year. Because my senior year, I had pretty much all my credits already, so I only had to take a couple classes, and I got out at, like, noon. So I would just fuck off, leave school, go to my part-time job, do that, listen to an audiobook, and just chill. Good money for a broke high schooler, and not that hard. Though, at one point my senior year, I was working 3 separate jobs.
これでも2件減らしたんだ。生活費だけで大変なのに学費まで稼がなくちゃいけない。なのに働き先は一つだけというのはあんまりだと思わない
Yeah,
か。
that's a rough one.
いや、あんまりなのはあなたの
Most
方
of the
だ
time
と
I was
思う
only
けど。
working 2. I only had the 3rd job for like a month or so. It was at a pizza place. My friend was the assistant manager, so he got me hired. But then, you know, a little bit down the road, they're like, we actually have enough people, so we don't actually need you. You can keep like your employee discount though. So I would go in there on like my lunch breaks and get like either free pizza or some nice discounted stuff. Though still irritated, her opinion of him changed a little. She was impressed that he was able to take care of his tuition and living expenses all on his own. She could also empathize with having no time to oneself. Her anger began to subside. The words part-time job were about the last thing she ever expected to hear out of this country boy's mouth.
そういうことなら仕方ないわね。いいわ、行きなさいよ。事情は分かったから。
青崎はいいのか？
What do you mean? Like, she'll stay mad, but, you know, less angry, I guess. She had no idea what his question meant, but she at least understood he was trying to be considerate, which also took her by surprise. She figured he'd be just as dense about people's feelings as he was about everything else.
別に。私もこのまま帰るから。
First, though, she thought it best that they both stop by the faculty room. Mr. Yamashiro had mentioned that the transfer procedures had already been completed, so all that remained was for him to go sign off on her duties.
先生、案内終わりました。
それはお疲れ様。しずきくんもお疲れ様。それで校舎を回った感想はどうかな？
ありがとうございます。 なんというかとても学校ですね。
Yeah, with his name, there's definitely more of like a sh to the S. You know, it's more like Shizuki instead of just Shizuki. At least that's how they're pronouncing it.
そうかそうか、うん、明日から頑張りなさい。
But I don't want to misread it. I don't wanna. She had no interest whatsoever in this pointless wrap-up meeting.
山城先生のことは気にしないでいいわ。教え子に厄介なことを押し付けてふんぞり返っているぐらい職員室が好きなんだから、何時間でも待ってるでしょ。いえ、待ってるべきじゃない？
I mean, yeah, delegate down. But
そうか、青崎がいいんならいいんだな。
no, don't be fine with it.
ん？
There it was again. Whatever Sojuro was getting at, Bro had no idea.
それじゃあ行くよ。今日はありがとう。
今日だけよ、今日だけ。
Man, my dude's got some bushy eyebrows. I can relate. She shooed him away with her hand. His face bent into a broad smile, as if he found the gesture endearing. It was a softer expression than she had grown accustomed to seeing out of him. It was the kind of smile that would make anyone smile back. Well, most people at least. Aoko Ozaki didn't betray the slightest hint of a smile.
それじゃあまた。
And with that friendly farewell, Sojuro walked towards the end of the hallway. So she had thought, before he turned into the next class over. You jumping out the window? Sojuro headed straight for one of the classroom windows. Whereupon he opened it with ease. The chilly November air filled the room as the soft sounds of the rain doubled in volume. In that instant, she realized his intention with opening the window. She really wished she hadn't.
いや、待て待て待て！
Yeah, we're definitely up on like either the second or third floor. He already had one leg out the window when she dashed to stop him.
何するつもりよ、あんたは！
Well, it's quicker this way. Just fucking slide down the rain gutter.
何ってアルバイトに行くんだけど。
その窓は人が出入りするところじゃないの。
Yes, it is. Look, the outside is right there.
だいたいここ何階だと思ってるの？
She saw the light of understanding dawn in his eyes. Well, depending which floor we're on depends on like what country we're in, because some people consider the ground floor to instead of like the first floor, them being the same. So the second floor, you know, the one above that is either the second floor or the first floor because the ground floor is separate than the first floor. It's a European thing. Europeans are dumb. Don't listen to them. They don't exist. She saw the light of understanding dawn in his eyes.
死ぬところだった。2階から降りたら危なすぎる。
危ないのはあんたの頭。
My guy's used to like little one hut bungalows up in the mountains where you can just slip out the window. Her insult went right over his head.
あのね、こっちじゃ窓から人は出入りしないの。さっき言っとくべきだったわ。
知ってるよ。時間がないんで慌ててたんだ。ありがとう。これからは気をつける。
He pulled his leg back inside and closed the window. School uniform was soaking wet from the rain.
いいけど、私は別に。あなたがどこから外に出ようが関係ないもの。
Yeah,
ただ、
kill yourself on your
で
own
きれば
time.
私の前では
When
や
I'm
らな
not
いで
around,
ほ
I
しい
don't
だけ
have
よ
to。file a police report or get an interview done.
それより、あなた、本当に明日から学校に来るの？
来るよ。不安だけど案内してもらったし。
He bid her farewell before running down the hall. She hoped he would walk down the stairs and leave through the school entrance like a normal person.
大丈夫なのか？あんなんで。
The image of him disappeared into the distance, popped into her head in spite of her ire. She had no intention of spending any more time with him, and yet she felt strangely anxious. She couldn't tell if the feeling was fueled by concern or irritation. Why had she even gotten angry with this insignificant transfer student in the first place? Strange day with a strange transfer student resulted in strange emotions. Her head tilted as she reflected on what should have been a more enjoyable day than the irritating experience she just had.
いっか。 どう
I
せ
feel
こ
like
れ
I
っきりな
butchered
ん
that
だし。
fucking sentence, but let's not fucking stay on that. The sound of the rain echoed quietly all around her. The gray sky seemed frozen in time. It was impossible to discern whether it was morning or evening. Mr. Yamashiro and Aoko were likely the only ones left at school. The unlit classroom looked overly gloomy and ominous as Aoko stood in it alone. She pulled up her left sleeve. Her dainty, unremarkable watch showed that it was almost 1
時
o'clock.
間合ってる。
Well, if you never have a clock around because you have no electricity, fucking internal clock gets real good. She looked out at the window at the grounds below. She saw a boy in uniform running through the rain without an umbrella. A sight she must have seen before, but for whatever reason, affected her far more than she wished. It's because now you know the person and it's not just some random muck. Aoko did not stop by the faculty room before heading home. While Mr. Yamashiro offered to drive her While Mr. Yamasiro's offer to drive her home was tempting, she decided it would ultimately be far more satisfying to ruin his day just like he had hers. She walked as quietly as she could towards the entrance and opened her bright red umbrella. As she had predicted that morning, the rain was waning in the afternoon. At this rate, it would probably cease completely in an hour or so. The distant sunshine would likely have reached her by the time she arrived home.
ま、それも悪くないか。
She shrugged her shoulders in resignation. She neither liked nor disliked rain, but she found herself enjoying her walk home with her red umbrella in hand. The teachers at Misaki High School weren't fond of bright colors, so Aoko's red umbrella was an unusual sight. They're not fond of what? That's a weird thing to be stingy about. A ghost story about how the umbrella was once pure white had been making its rounds, but it featured Aoko instead of a ghost. It was within that umbrella that she made her way towards Misaki Station. What is it, her weapon of choice? Stained with the blood of her enemies. The private Misaki High School got its name from the town of the same name. The area was once a sprawl of farmland and woodland, but rapid growth over the last 10 years had laid unprecedented modernization. Damn, only 10 years? Fuck. There were some who fought to preserve Misaki's natural treasures.
残すことには賛成ですが、それでは残すだけになってしまうでしょう。
Time moves forward, things change, it's unfortunate. With those words, the mayor snuffed out the voices of the minority and ushered in a long-term plan for new urban development. It is depressing, though, to go back home after, several years and, drive through and, oh, that patch of trees is gone, and there's new housing development there. Oh, they tore down that building and replaced it with something new. Oh, that store closed, so on and so forth. More than enough funds for the urban development were collected, and the unassuming town of Misaki became the largest municipality of Misaki City in merely 10 years. Even though it lacked the modernity of the neighboring Yashirogi, or the elegance of Misaki Hills. Japanese
それも
urban
当然よ
fucking
ね。
divisions
ど
don't
う
make
い
any
じくっ
sense
て
to
も
me.
もともとが山中の宿場町だし、
I
山ご
can,
と切り崩すって言う
I
なら
guess I
別
shouldn't
だ
say
け
it
ど
makes no sense. I can get it in my head, but the subdivisions of cities and the towns that fall under the same umbrella just to my fucking Anglo-American brain, it just does not compute when I picture it in my head and try to draw the lines on the map. Urbanization had been contained to the lowlands around the station, with most of the hills and mountains still standing as they did 10 years prior. The exhaustion of funds succeeded in protecting the old Misaki where the citizens could not. It became a truly odd suburban town, welcoming an increasingly urban population with its vestiges of old country charm. Misaki High School was a private school established long before the town's current state. The original campus, built 50 years ago, was located high up in the mountains, making its current location its second incarnation. The path to the old school grounds was remote, steep, and also well trodden by animals. For these reasons, among others, Misaki High School had been shuttered until almost 20 years ago, when it received a donation from a department store chain that allowed it for the construction of a new campus in the city. And thus, Misaki High School reopened its doors, the old woodland campus forgotten. In fact, most of the students attending Misaki High School were not from Misaki at all. The hardy rustic people of this country town preferred prefectual. I put the emphasis wrong. Prefectual schools to private ones. Truth be told, Aoko herself was one of them. All she had wanted after junior high was to move to Tokyo, where she hoped to spend her days enjoying live music on her way to entering a public university. But her hopes were dashed with her sister's departure, so here she was, walking alone in town with only a red umbrella to keep her company on what would have been a day off.
思い返してみると、私の人生ってなんか災難続きっぽい。
That's everyone's life, girl. Her frustration evaporated into the cold December air. I thought it was November.
でもいっか。退屈。
Oh, sorry. I cut her off. With those words, her mood brightened a bit as she left her school in her wake. The busier part of town met her at the bottom of the gently sloping road. Misaki's train station was brand new. Once looking no prettier than an abandoned factory, it had been renovated into a multi-purpose structure with huge department stores on the east and west sides. Also, the fact that, this is considered like a suburban, like fucking bumfuck nowhere town is like mind-boggling to me. Because, I had to drive like half an hour through the woods in order to get to my school. When the department store first opened, Aoko and her friends had been impressed with their modern feel, but in time, the stores too became dated. She had no shopping to do today, so she passed them by. What she really wanted to do was rest at a cafe, but she fought the urge, knowing her roommate would never let her hear the end of it as she frittered away their money. Her money, oh god, my mouth just fucking melted on that one. She looked back and blinked. For just a moment, she could have sworn she had seen someone suspicious in a red dress out of the corner of her eye. You good? Must have been her imagination. The sixth sense chill she was experiencing down her spine was a familiar one at this point. She continued her walk home, brushing off the event as if it had never happened. In time, the chill faded, and all that was left was the sound of the town. She sighed heavily. Had she imagined it? Even if it had all been in her head, she was far from comfortable with the feeling that still lingered. Yeah, like these buildings. Oh yeah, this is a suburban fucking, middle of nowhere. Yeah, okay. We had one of those in my city. Like, I would have to drive like fucking 20, 30 minutes into the city. City, quote unquote, less than 100,000 people. Biggest in the state. There was just one building like that downtown. And the rest was like all like 5-story little fucking mill buildings everywhere. She grumbled under her breath.
波乱万丈、商売繁盛、諸行無常と。そうそう、忙しさに愚痴を言っても始まらないわ。
Unfortunately, summer and bugs go hand in hand. So you could see how bugs could be drawn to all the sweet fruit. Ooh, look at this. This is a nice little bop. Making me hungry. I'm gonna have to go to Wawa after this. Rank with grease and heat, the kitchen was closed for the time being. The lunch rush had come and gone. But one last battle remained, dinner time. Only after the evening chaos could the kitchen crew remove their white armor and call it a day. In the midst of the war zone was a lone newcomer.
これ着るんですか？
His voice was uneasy, betraying how new he was.
気持ちはわかる。俺もどうかと思うけど、店長の言うことだか
That's a
ら、
nice looking
もう
uniform.
笑顔で乗り越えてくれ。
It's a good
これも商店街の
yellow,
明
nice
日
and
の
dark.
ためなんだとよ。
You know, almost like a mustard
気で申し訳ないん
instead
だ
of
が、
like a really
雨も
bright
止んだし
yellow.
なんとか行ってき
Easy
て
on
く
the
れないか。
eyes. Good
無事
color
帰ってきた
combination
ら
with the
晩
brown.
飯おごってやっから。
His bright orange co-worker clasped his hands together as if to beg for forgiveness as he saddled him with this unreasonable task. I guess I could consider that orange. Ten years ago, Misaki City was a town of farm and woodland. But everything had changed. The front of the station was now lined with tall multi-story buildings, and the residential areas were similarly full of apartment complexes. The once rustic scenery around the station had long become a thing of the past. Ooh. Shiroi Inuzuka. Shiro Inuzuka. Okay. Shiro Inuzuka. There we go. 3 parts. Shiro Inuzuka was the only place in the city that still contained vestiges of the old town, a pocket of the past inside an urban jungle. The road extended up a conspicuously high hill to an old residential district far from the hustle and bustle of the train station. Even that, like, that urban density, fucking mind-boggling from where I was from. Long ago, it had been considered unwise to build on high ground, so nobody lived above a certain elevation. Shiro Inuzuka, sitting as it did atop the hill in the middle of town, was no exception to that convention and had no residences to speak of. It looks like there's one building up there. Up like way up on the hillside, unless it's a rocky outcrop, I can't really tell. The asphalt continued for some time, eventually giving way to a mountain road that was swallowed into the cover of trees. A lone vending machine stood to mark the boundary between town and beyond. Even the children knew there was nothing beyond the new playground and the development that so enthralled them. Well, that was not entirely true. There was nothing besides the haunted house. Aoko Ozaki traversed the long slope. Below her, she could see the whole of Misaki. The symmetrical town looked like a miniature set from this height. It would look like a painting if there had been a sea next to it, but unfortunately, Misaki City was very much landlocked. While it was overcast at the moment, the scene was quite breathtaking on clear evenings. The view was the one thing that made the arduous climb worthwhile, and today she had been denied even that.
ああ、雨の日は自転車も使えないし、
Oh god,
一
cycling up
日
these
に
hills?
2回ぐらい
Oh,
バスでも通
fucking
ってくれないも
calves.
んかな、ほんと。
Screaming just thinking about it. Just get a moped. Aoko had been using this road to get to school for almost 2 years now, but the journey had never gotten easier.
あれ、鍵閉まったまま？
It's quite a walk, though. Your fucking legs must pack a punch. I wouldn't want to get kicked by you.
アリス、まだ帰ってきてないんだ。
With a weary shrug, she put her hand on the rusty iron fence. Quietly, the heavy gates swung open as if to welcome her home. There sits atop the hill a haunted house. That is how the story, much shared around town, used to begin. But fresh rumors about the house had sprung to life almost as fast as the town's modernization. Despite being dilapidated and abandoned for many years, lights can be seen inside the house at night. An angry murder of crows often gather atop the hill before mysteriously vanishing. Children get lost in the fog, never to be seen again. Late at night, a shrieking sound can be heard all all the way to town. This peculiar piece of slander was one Aoko wished to discredit the most. What, you fucking practicing your music? Like, someone's getting murdered up there. The final rumor was of an eye-catching luxury car that sometimes made its way up and down the hill. The rumors spread and grew by the day. And while they grew, the house that everyone thought had rotted away was restored over the recent years. Deep in the wood, atop of a hill no one dared to approach, like a ruin, shrouded from view even on the brightest of days, stood a relic out of time, a building from a fairy tale. The house. Nice house. I dig houses with like the spire on top of the windows on them. Was the Kuwanji Mansion. Kuwan? Yeah. Everyone in town knew about the witch's house on the hill. The unabashedly haunted house where Aoko Ozaki resided for reasons unknown. Needless to say, it was not really haunted. The Kuonji family, I know after an O it makes the U sound long and the O itself isn't really supposed to be pronounced, but it's fucking with my brain. Anyway, Kuonji Mansion, the Kuonji family home was a grand Western-style mansion with a long and storied history stretching all the way back to England. It's far too small to be a dormitory, yet too big to be called a house. The main building contained as many as 3 normal houses worth of rooms and was surrounded by a large all-encompassing courtyard. The perimeter to the ground was surrounded by a high iron fence covered in thorny vines. There was also an annex to the main building. Given such extravagance, it was no wonder that inspired rumors. To the town residents, the mere existence of such a lavish and out-of-place mansion on top of a hill was a cause for suspicion. Rumors, lies, and slander were all the price to pay for the fame. With only 2 lodgers, it was hard to disagree with the perception that vampires must be living here. No, that's a different game.
私はともかく、アリスはそういうのやりかねないし。
She put her hand on the front door. It was a grand double door that would have paired well with a brass lock, and yet it was secured with little more than a simple keyhole. Pushing it open with one hand, she entered the supposedly haunted house. And, by the way, if vampires were not enough to scare you, ghosts were known to appear on certain nights. Well, it's got a nice inside, at least. Much like the weather outside, the foyer was overcast with shades of gray. Perhaps by deliberate design, the architect had chosen not to include any lights in the entrance area. Goddamn fucking vaulted ceilings, this looks like a bitch to heat. The ceiling was 2 floors high. The only light in the room came from the skylight. It was particularly gloomy on rainy days. On moonless nights, it was like the world itself ceased to be. Aoko decided the drawing room to the east would be a good place to rest, but knowing that she would not be able to relax until she changed clothes, she started up the stairs. The stairs curled up the wall to the 2nd floor hall. There was a 3rd floor attic as well, accessible from the far end of the hall. She had never set foot in there in the 2 years she had lived here, though. God, I'm gonna keep fucking this up until I hear it said out loud. The Kuonji Mansion was more or less divided into 2 wings, east and west. Aoko had been given the entire east wing, but 2 rooms were more than enough, as far as she was concerned. She had no desire to open a door that would trap you into a storybook world or lead it to an attic that had only been used for storage these last 5 years. Aoko's room was at the end of the East Wing's long corridor. She had elected for a smaller room, for no other reason than that she thought it'd be easier to clean. Same. Hell, even my place, I live alone. It's a little 2-story, 2-bedroom, like 1.5 bath place. And even that, it's like almost too big for me. Like, the second room, I just have, like, a tatami and a kotatsu in there, and it's, like, my study room. But, like, I probably should, like, get a smaller apartment or something, but I really fucking hate living in apartments and having neighbors. Especially because, you know, my vampire nighttime schedule shift, it, you know, allows me to scream into my microphone at 3 a.m. like I am right now and not disturb anybody if I live alone, you know. It was furnished with a large bed, her beloved mahogany desk, wardrobe and chest for her clothes, and 2 9-shelf bookcases. That sounds like a heavy fucking desk. I know, because I have a solid wood desk myself, and it is a bitch to move. This is all she brought with her from home. Her entire life of 16 years reduced to this. She borrowed the next room down for her own purposes.
そうだ。アリスにもらった見張りと壊れてないかチェックしないと。
She needed to see if the project she had been working on all night had borne fruit. The study next door served as proof of the life that she had been living for the last year and how different that life was from the one she had lived before. It was not a room for the person she had been. It was a room for the person she would eventually become, a place of solitude that only she could enter, or so she thought. Your little workshop?
うわ、壊れてるどころか跡形もなく消え去ってる。やっぱ自己流アレンジはまだ早かったか。いいわよ。笑いなさいよ、コマドリ。
Cheap, cheap. The noisy. The noisy neighbor that had intruded upon her sanctuary flew away. Nosy, it is nosy. While not exceptionally talented, Aoko did not lack for effort and was not afraid to fail. One could have almost mistaken her approach for optimism. She changed out of her uniform and returned to the first floor. Down the stairs, she opened the door to the east wing into the corridor as dark as a cellar. The absence of windows meant that it was pitch black without the lights on, so she flicked the switch and entered the nearby doorway. At least you have a fucking TV. Your mansion's already better than the Tono house. It had been her idea to update the drawing room. The walls were decorated with extravagant patterns. And around the room were large, majestic sofas and a luxury Persian rug. Amidst it all was a 30-inch television that seemed completely out of place. Stood looking over at the other furniture like an emperor with no clothes. The mansion's owner would have rather done without it, but to a commoner like Aoko, it was an essential commodity. They had fought over its presence at first, but eventually come to an agreement, and now mutually enjoyed its modern comfort. Well, I guess the Tono house does have a TV, it's just fucking in Kohaku's room so she can play video games. Oh, sorry to cut her off again. Yeah, like I said, if you're new here, get used to it. Now, in a somewhat pleasant mood, she decided to brew some tea. She boiled some water in the kitchen, prepared a teapot, and made herself some black tea. I need to get more black tea. All I have is like 2 different kinds of green tea, and it's nice, but, you know, like a nice, like, black peach tea. With a flop, she sank into the sofa. She took a sip of her tea, then another. certainly fucking big chillin'. Gonna watch anything on that TV, or just gonna sit in her room and drink tea in the quiet solitude? Lulled by the ticking of the clock, she took a third sip as she pondered how to spend her afternoon. The sofa almost seemed to be inviting her, and she sunk even further into its comforting embrace. Aoko blurrily opened her eyes as she lifted her body up from the cushions. Hello, Alice. This was no dream or delusion. At some point, a girl had sat down across from her. Not the least bit surprised, she reached for her teacup. But the tea had gone completely cold. Just like the coffee left in my cup. It's awful. Ugh. That's the bad thing about ceramic mugs. If they start chilling off, it just sucks all the heat out of your drink. She asked the question to the girl on the other side of the table. The girl answered without lifting her gaze. When silent, she could have been mistaken for a beautiful doll. The girl sitting on the opposite sofa was reading an old book. She had delicate limbs and pale white skin. Not a hint of humanity emanated from her melancholic aura. Yes, very, very Ray. I guess I'd make Aoko Asuka. You know, which also explains why she's best girl. She had darker hair than Aoko, and her icy eyes were focused on the pages in front of her. Clothes resembled that of a nun, but were actually her school uniform. In Aoko's humble opinion, the gloominess suited her. She invoked something like out of a painting. There was something unreal about her, as if she were frozen in time. The white of her neck was so lovely that even Aoko found herself enchanted by it. The girl was one of the haunted house's 2 residents. Her name was Alice, I'm gonna keep messing it up. And then my brain's just gonna stop working as I fumble over the pronunciation in my head. Kunji. Let's just go with that. Kunji. And she was the same age as Aoko.
私どれくらい寝てた？
Konji.
1時間と少し。
I'll get it eventually, don't
こ
worry.
こで眠ると風
I'm
邪ひ
reading
くわよ。
Umineka right now, and it fucking took me like a couple hours to get Ushiromiya down in my head. Even then, I just fumbled it trying to get it from memory, but moving on. Alice answered indifferently. Not that it bothered Aoko, who was now used to it. She looked at the clock on the wall and saw that it was already 7. She had been asleep for 2 hours. The day had been a rough one for her, and she had slept little the night before, so it was no surprise that she had dozed off for as long as she had.
残してくれてもよかったのに。せっかくの紅茶が冷めちゃったじゃない。
私が来た時はもう冷めてたわ。
でしょうね。行ってみただけよ。
Yeah, just throw that nice porcelain cup in the microwave. Aoko drank down the rest of the cold tea in one gulp. In the poorly heated, and I already forgot, Konji mansion, it was more than enough to clear her head and wake up.
こうなると、フォートナム&メイソンも何もないわね。おかえり、アリス。玉の贅沢もあんた抜きじゃ閉まらないってことかしら。今日は薬日か天中殺か。ちょっと早いけど、お参りってのも十分ありかもね。
Aoko shrugged her shoulders as if resigning herself to her fate.
それで何があったの？
After 2 years together, they knew each other quite well. Aoko had one way of asking questions, and Alice had another. Alice asked without raising her head, and Aoko gave her the details.
まず謝らなくちゃいけない。昨日徹夜で完成させた例のあれ、意味がなくなっちゃったのよ。ちょっと目を離した隙に沸騰しすぎて壊れちゃったみたい。そうならないよう循環のコードを 2,3 本外したり縫合したりしたんだけど。
Aoko tried to laugh it off as if it was someone else's problem.
どういう
Where's
こ
the
と？
stuffy? Give me a moment. Oh god, that was gross. Be glad I muted the mic on that.
今朝休養が入って学校に呼び出し受けたの。そこで転入生の世話を押し付けられて一日が無残にも消費されちゃって、
is what it
帰って
is.
きたら怒るアリス。
別に青子の器物破損にいちいち怒っていたら一生分の口論をすることになるでしょう。
Yeah, you gotta learn to eventually just roll with the
代用
punches.
品はあるからまた一から始めればいいわ。それより怒ってるのはあなたの方じゃないの？
I mean, it seems like she's always angry, but... You mean like more than usual? Alice was very much on point today. It was true that, despite outward appearances, Aoko was seething with frustration. That aside...
この転入生っていうのがひどくずれててね。すごい山奥で暮らしてたらしくて、こっちの常識が通じないんだから。三問以下いって言葉があるけど、あれって本当のことなのね、アリス。
Alice raised her head in response to hearing her name. But Aoko kept going on before she could get a word in edgewise. Aoko, after all, expected no sympathy in the first place.
初対面から尺に触るやつだったけど、教室を案内した
Yeah,
時なんか
she's
失神し
venting
そう
her
になった
frustration
わ。
to the void.
そいつ、教室で教師と1対1で授業を受けるもんだと思ってたらしいの。それはそれでまだ流せる。許容範囲よ。で、私が簡潔かつ丁寧に教室の何たるかを教えた後で、そいつなんて言ったと思う？それで青崎、他の教室は何に使うんだ？
Fair question.
ですって。教室に他も何もないでしょ？なんていうか、そいつは少しでも説明を怠るとそのままで納得しちゃうのよ。
You were purposely being unhelpful?
何も疑問に思わないというか、想像力が欠如してるっていうか、
Didn't know any
想
better,
像するこ
so
とに慣れてないっていう
of
か。
course you take it at face value.
まあ、一度言ったことはちゃんと分かってるっぽいからバカってわけじゃないんだけど。
あなたが人を批評するのは珍しいわね。そういうダメな人気にするたちだったの？
Well, yeah, he didn't get any of her, like, backhanded barbs. He just rolled with it, and that fucking pissed her off even more.
みじんたりとも気にしないわよ。けど、明日からどんな間違いをしでかすのかちょっと心配なだけ。
What she was really worried about was having to clean up that mess. Was having to clean up that mess if and when it happened. That had to be it. If not, it would mean she had no real idea why she could not get him out of her head.
とにかく変なやつなの。
No idea why I can't
案
really
外ア
either.
リスと気が合うかも。
三問一回はいい言葉ね。
But from her eyes, it was clear that the question of whether they would get along was irrelevant, given that they had never met in the first place. Aoko gave a non-committal response.
ところでアリス、さっきから何読んでるの？
霊的進化論の二次創作、
Cool.
スピリチュアルダイアリのまがいもの。
ああ、スウェーデンボリー。
Sounds very
そんなの
high-minded.
今更読んでも仕方ないんじゃない？
新書なら退屈だけど、これは偽書だから。
What do you mean?
彼の欠点と長所を劇的に褒め上げている。よくできた冒険小説のようよ。立ちはだかる秘密組織の名前がカントとか気が利いているわ。筆跡はあなたのおじいさんのものだけど。
へえ、あの人そういう趣味まであったんだ。割とユーモアがあったのね。惜しい人を亡くしたわ。
Aoko seemed nostalgic over her now deceased grandfather.
あなたのおじいさん、夏に頼りをくれたけど。
よしてよ、死んだものと考えたいのに。
You know, fucking ghosts. Ooh. Aoko sighed and laid back on the sofa. The soft cushions caved in under her weight.
話は戻るけど、
Alice shot a glance at Aoko. Her body, buried in the sofa, remained as still as a corpse. It was clear Aoko had tuned out of the conversation. Alice silently chastised her with a look. The more she thought about it, the less important the events of the day seemed to become. If she just ignored Alice, the conversation would end here. They would eventually get up and leave today's mistake unresolved for another day. However, that's not the kind of person Aoko Aozaki was.
いいわよ。何？
She asked, still lying down.
今日できなかったのは少し痛いわね。
だから反省してるって。学校優先は一人前になってからでしょ。
Mm-hmm.
ならいいけ
Quit
ど。
juggling both lives, you know, you gotta commit to one. The coldness in her voice made Aoko gnash her teeth. She knew what Alice wanted to say. She knew better than anyone. The veneer she wore for school was different than the way she lived at home. Well, that's most people. While it could be called hiding in plain sight, Alice thought it was silly. And what the silence told her was,
覚悟を決めろって言いたいのよね、あんたは。
today's failure was not a colossal one. She just happened to upset the delicate balance between her home and school lives, chasing one at the expectation of the other. And yet, that careless mistake was a clear sign of Aoko's lack of commitment.
アリスは関係ない。これは私が私で決めなくちゃいけないこと。
Well, if you're causing problems for her, then it is her issue. She had only known for sure for the last year and a half. But she'd had a hunch for as long as she could remember. Make the choice, and the day will come. It was little wonder that her morals and conscience had been stripped away. Aoko pushed herself back up. She was met by Alice's cold beauty and wordless gaze.
オッケー、アリス。来週中に決
Yeah,
着を
the,
つけ
the
よう。
C into the apostrophe, yes, fucking melted my head.
それでいいんでしょ？
ええ、青子がいいなら。
Aoko could not help but shake her head, feeling as if she was hearing something similar for the second time that day. Even in the comfort of her own, she couldn't banish thoughts of that country boy from her head. In the comfort of her own? Her own home? Or like, her own thoughts?
じゃあ、下準備はよろしくね。私
Or
まだ
in
できないし。
the presence of her own people? Like Alice? That sentence is a little ambiguous. Or maybe I'm just dumb. Probably the latter. Definitely the latter.
妥当な線ね。あ、でももう一件の方は？そっちの方が急務じゃない？
時と場合、森に変化があれば教える
Are
わ
we。doing magic side jobs? After that brief exchange, Alice returned her attention to the book on her lap. Shop talk was over. Now, they could return to their normal relationship as roommates. Aoko grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Since Alice was busy reading, Aoko decided to tune into a variety show that had already started. Alice started to speak, but suddenly cut herself off. One of her delicate hands raised to her mouth. She had always cut herself off the second she realized she was about to say something trivial. Sometimes, her self-restraint would hit too late, and she would make a gesture like the one she was making now. It occurred to Aoko that sound her cute little roommate made just now was different from the wa she blurted out in times past.
何？
Aoko turned down the volume on the TV. Her intense eyes lit up like those of a mischievous
どう
cat.
ということはないんだけど。
ないんだけど？
Alice looked away bashfully, not knowing if she should bring it up or not. It was times like these that her expression carried a real warmth and surprising charm. If she could see her in this moment, Alice's father would have to admit that her name suited her perfectly.
今日帰ってくるときおかしなものを見て誰かに話そうと思っていたんだけど。
Aoko nodded, beckoning her to continue.
つまらない、本当に意味のないことよ。けどどう考えてもそんなことをする理由がわからない。青子、人間ぐらいの大きな猫がひょこひょこ出前をする理由ってわかる？
I see. That would be the thing he had to wear. Boss's orders. Then I guess the one in the chef's apron or uniform would have been the coworker. For a second, Aoko thought Alice was trying and failing miserably to make a joke again. One would think that about anyone, really. But she seemed completely serious. Even if Alice's sense of humor fell flat for Aoko, this story already sounded more fanciful than Alice's usual attempt at a joke. Aoko concluded that her roommate was talking about something she had actually seen.
その話には2つぐらい信じがたい部分があるけど、
Yeah,
一つ
we
ず
need
つ
more
論破していい？
details. What?
いいの。私もからくりぐらいは思いつくから。ただ理由がわからないから聞いてるの。わざわざ精巧な猫のぬいぐるみを着て出前のてんやものを届けに行くことってそんなに簡単かしらね。
難易度以前にそれをやる人間の常識性を疑うけどね、私は。
No, if you just see a normal person out on delivery, you tune it out. It's just background noise. But if you see someone in a big old fancy cat costume, it catches your attention.
まあ、世の中いろいろあるから。私たちみたいなのもいれば、下界から遮断された山奥で暮らしていたやつまで10人十色よ。私だったら、見かけたら声かけて理由を尋ねただろうけど。
Well, if they're making deliveries, they were probably moving too quick. Alice's gaze drifted at that.
暮れゆく住宅街にさまよう出前猫か。
Beginning of a weird ghost
背
story.
景が夕焼けだったらファンタジーだったでしょうに。で、今日の夕飯どうする？せっかく話が出たし、私らもてんやものにしようか。
Aoko loved getting takeout, and her face glowed as she spoke. They had no hard rules for dinner, but if one of them was in a mood to cook, they made it a point to make enough for two. At the very worst, this meant entire weeks without dinner, but the two of them agreed that this was the system that worked best for them. See, know anything about living alone? It's a fucking pain in the ass to cook for one. It's just way too much cleanup, so I always end up just eating fucking canned food. Whether they found cooking to be too much effort or simply liked ordering out, nights like this one were a common occurrence, much to the chagrin of the restaurants in Misaki town. Delivering to the mansion meant coming all the way out to the top of the hill, as the source of their disgruntlement.
時間は8時前。ギリギリセーフね。
Well, then again, it's Japan,
私今
so
月がいい
probably
な。
don't have much of a
あ
tipping
そこの
culture to
月見
begin
そ
with.
ば最近ご無沙汰だったし。
The hungry student council president took out their many menus and excitedly looked for anything that stood out. Alice casually responded without sparing much of a glance.
悪いけど私夕飯済んでるの。
The betrayal. You were asleep. With those words, Aoko froze. All deliveries required a minimum of 2 items, so she was out of luck without an accomplice. Cruel society had decided it couldn't be bothered to deliver to a princess who only ordered a single serving of food. Incidentally, to counteract orders from the Hilltop Mansion, the restaurants had declared, the minimum number of orders will be 3 starting next year. Aoko and Alice were still in the dark to this fiendish change in direction.
この裏切り者だから帰ってくるのが遅かったのね。帰宅部、学校までバス徒歩込みで片道20分のあんたがなんで5時以降に帰ってくんのか考えるべきだったわ。
Unfortunately for Aoko, she had been too out of it to even remember that she was the one who had fallen asleep.
ああ、ひどい女。そういう時は残された一人のためにお土産買ってくるのが暗黙の了解だったのに。私だってこの前の外食の時はアリスの分も買ってきたじゃない。
It was unknown how serious Aoko was being, but she was visibly angry. She had already woken up hungry that morning, and from the time she was called into school until now, she had consumed nothing but tea. It was a small miracle that her stomach was not growling. She knew it was her own fault, but she persisted, wanting to get revenge on Alice for scolding her earlier.
この前ってあれのこと？あなたが都心に出向いた時、夕食にお寿司を食べてきたのに、お土産はなぜかコンビニエンスストアのビニール袋だったって話？
I guess you can get sushi for takeout if you take it home like immediately, but Aoko had kicked a hornet's nest.
何よ、買ってこないよりはマシでしょ。
真実は時に隠蔽すべきね。
Yeah. Alice's icy gaze pierced right through her. Aoko had certainly crossed a line by going on and on about how the sushi circled around the restaurant while Alice had ate her convenience store meal. But new things fascinated her, and she couldn't contain her curiosity towards the conveyor belt sushi shops that started popping up at the time. They were nothing short of miraculous. Even honesty can be a sin, given the right circumstances.
わかった。わかりました。じゃあ今回のは前のと帳消しってことでいいわね。
Eye for an eye and all that. Alice went back to her book without so much as recognizing the question. The fact that she did not confirm it made Aoko anxious.
仕方ない。今日は薬日だし、おとなしく台所に立って料理の腕を磨く
Can
と
you at
し
least
まし
make
ょう。
fried rice? Alice stood up. She stood up, announcing her intent to no one in particular.
あ、聞き忘れてた。アリス、どこで夕食済ませたの？
Alice's hand froze on her current page. She suddenly shut the book she was reading and stood up, as if at wit's end. She walked across the drawing room with her book in hand. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned towards Aoko. Yep, gotta secure your fucking escape first before you drop a bombshell.
聞きたい。
まあ、なんとなく。
Aoko nodded timidly, cowed by Alice's sudden vigor. Alice continued in her matter-of-fact way.
その猫が余ったメニューをくれたのよ。
And with that brief response, she left the room. Well, that's bizarre. Well, look at that. Woohoo, chapter break. Ooh, finally made it, my god. I've had to pee like a fucking racehorse for like the past 30 minutes, but I've toughened out just for you guys. So with that, that's where we're going to end it here for today. For what? Who? For today. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. See you all next time for the next episode of Mahoyo. Or you can go and watch any of my other previous series that I've done by scrolling through my playlist section and clicking on everything and liking them all and commenting and ringing that notification bell to boost your algorithm. Hey, that's a nice thing about new series, you know, get a whole bunch of new people in here, but you gotta bump those numbers, dog. But in reality, I don't care about that. This is just a hobby for me. But yeah, with that, I will stop wasting all your time. So goodbye, everyone. See you next time. Bye.